We were just talking about agency, the broker disclosure form, and Christian, you and I have talked. One of the things that comes up all the time is transaction broker. And what does that mean? We've got the Kansas broker disclosure form. I've got it in front of me, and it really tells us that a transaction broker is not an agent for either party and does not advocate for the interests of either party. Missouri says similar things. But I think it's important for us to just break down what it means to be a transaction broker. What are our obligations? What can we do? But probably more importantly, Christian, what can we not do?
So as a transaction broker, oftentimes, historically in our market, most people have worked as transaction brokers when they were already representing clients on both sides of a transaction. So they had an agency relationship with the seller, they had an agency relationship with the buyer. Those two want to come together. Well, they can't operate as an agent for both of them. So they've got to become a transaction broker where you walk that middle. And as you just said, it is truly you're working in the best interest of the transaction, and you can't disclose things that you learned under your agency capacity. So the transaction broker, that's one of the biggest things, Patrick, that you can't do is disclose any information. Confidentiality is king. You can't disclose any confidential information that you've learned in your relationship with either party. You're working towards a transaction.
That's interesting, yeah. And I think a transaction broker comes to a lot of agents' minds, especially when they're a listing agent. Maybe they've been working with a buyer, they have an agency agreement signed with this buyer. All of a sudden, they take a new listing. That buyer is interested in this new listing, and then they think, oh, we'll just do transaction broker. You have to remember that your clients have to be, for one thing, open to that. But number two, it changes our relationship with those clients. And are they up for that? Are they interested in not really getting your best impartial advice, instead with you just managing the transaction? I guess that's an important difference too, yeah?
It is. It's really slippery operating as a transaction broker. And I know Missouri allows disclosed dual agent. We as a company don't allow it, but very similar liability issue there when you're operating as a transaction broker, even a disclosed dual agent, if you're allowed to do that, is where do you draw the line? And a lot of agents have a hard time drawing that line. And when you don't understand how a transaction broker should function in the first place and don't have that foundational knowledge, it's real hard then to abide by the duties and obligations that you have as a transaction broker. I see the biggest, Patrick, probably misuse of transaction broker is when you have a listing and a unrepresented buyer comes along and wants to write an offer on that listing, and the listing agent or one of their team members, if you're operating as designated agents, and when you get one team member, you get them all, they think that they can convert to a transaction broker and work both sides of the transaction, oftentimes at their own benefit financially. And that is completely incorrect. As Jeff Carson taught me, you dance with the one that brought you. And you represented the seller first. You did not have a prior agency relationship with the buyer. And you don't convert to a transaction broker. That buyer stays unrepresented. Or you refer them to an agent if they want representation. I think that's where a lot of agents get stuck, and where it's that slippery slope of they try to do it based on a financial benefit to themselves as an agent, not maybe what's in the best interest of the client or consumer, customer. And I think that, really, truth be told, Patrick, that has some degree as to why we're in this big mess, because we put the needs of the agents first and not maybe the clients or customers. So transaction broker is slippery, and to do it and do it correctly, you have to study it and know what you can and cannot do, and the lines you can't cross.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were just talking about in a previous clip, reading that broker disclosure form and understanding those types of representation. You brought up something interesting. I mean, there's differences even between the two states that we work in here in Kansas City, and knowing those, maybe they're not best for the client, but at least understanding them so then we can explain it to a client. That's what it's all about. When our clients hire us, they look for us to be up on the times and to understand our job, understand the rules of the road that we have to follow. And so being able to convey that easily to our clients is important. I think what I got out of all of that is to really understand that if you had an unrepresented buyer call you on your listing, which is going to be probably more common in the future than even it has been in the past, well, then using a transaction broker addendum not the right time to do that. Instead, if you had had a buyer that you had been working with under agency, then you took a listing, all of a sudden they're interested in each other. Is that a time you could use that if it's in the client's best interest and if they choose to do that? That's the key. And I'm going long winded here. Have you ever known me to do that? I'm doing it again. I think the important thing to remember about all of this is who hired you and why did they hire you? What kind of counsel or services was that client looking for? And making sure that we always fall back on remembering that. That's the future of our business, is keeping those clients happy. So Christian, yeah, that was like 5 points in one, but I think it was good intel. Anything else to add about transaction broker?
I don't think so. I think between both you and I, they're going to have a really good idea as to what transaction broker is and what it isn't and when to use it.
Are you guys watching us on 1.5 speed? Because that might make it a little bit easier. Don't go too fast, go, because I sound like a chipmunk, but speed it up a little bit and you might enjoy it. That's this clip. See you on the next one.